Anyway, we are very excited for our next panel. As many of you know, we live in the Sunshine State. So this energy panel is going to be focused on the power of the sun. And we actually very excited to have with us here a very diverse group of speakers and experts and panelists. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Ms. Katie Ottenweller from Vote Solar. Thank you, Katie, for being here. The Director of Sustainability and Resilience for the City of Orlando, Mr. Chris Castro.
Fan club.
And also the Area Manager of Governor Affairs for Florida Power and Light, Mr. Armando Fernandez. Welcome. And the State Director of Environment Florida, Ms. Jennifer Rubiello. And with further ado, I'm going to leave it to our moderator, Katie. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I wanted to start with a few PowerPoint slides just to frame up what's been going on in the solar energy space in the Sunshine State. I do. Let's see. Oh, perfect. A quick word on Vote Solar. As Yoka mentioned, I'm the Southeast Director. We're a nonprofit that was formed in 2002. We work to bring solar energy into the mainstream. We've got a little over 30,000 members across the state of Florida. And part of what I'm trying to do is just give y'all a sense of, actually this is an earlier version of the PowerPoint slides, but I'm gonna skip over that one. I want to give y'all a sense of kind of where we are at in terms of solar power and how the national changes that we're seeing in the energy landscape fit into what's happening on the ground here in Florida. So solar energy has come down about 80% in price over the last decade. We've just seen an incredible price decline from this technology, and economists project that that actually is going to decrease another 40% just in the next few years. When you see those types of price declines, what happens is you start seeing people make more investments. All of a sudden, solar is on par with traditional energy resources. And so we're seeing an increase of about 7 times the amount of solar energy that we had 5 years ago, we've now got across the United States. So over 50 gigawatts of solar. And another thing that I want to mention about solar is just how incredibly popular it is. There aren't many things that we all agree on as Americans, which is unfortunate. But solar is one of those rare things where kind of across the political spectrum, 89% of Americans want to see utilities make more investments in solar energy. And that's true across the board. So progressive Democrats, 96% popularity. Conservative Republicans, 80% popularity. So solar, in some ways, is kind of like apple pie and puppies, if that's a helpful reference. I mean, this is an incredibly popular technology, and people want to see more investments be made in this space. A couple of years ago, Florida really was behind the curve, even just looking at the rest of the Southeast in terms of how much solar we had on the ground. In 2017, there was twice as much solar installed in Georgia, 4 times as much in North Carolina. But the Sunshine State is really playing catch up now. So even just in the last year, we've moved up. Now Florida is 8th nationally in terms of solar investments. And those investments are going to continue. We're a top 5 state for residential rooftop solar installations. We're the #2 job creator last year, which is really exciting. And those are jobs that are boots on the roof. They can't be outsourced. They can't be automated. These are really incredible jobs for the state of Florida. And they're jobs that don't require a college education, but that are paying a living wage. And overall, we're seeing almost $4 billion invested in the state based on solar. But we've got a whole lot of runway left. We're still only making up a very small slice of the overall electricity pie in Florida, not even 2% right now. So we've got a long way to go. I don't want to steal my panelists' thunder, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Florida utilities are starting to make really significant investments in solar power, which is very exciting to see.
Should be proud of that.
And I'll let Armando talk a little bit about where Florida Power and Light is coming in on that. But the last thing I wanted to flag is around resilience, and just tying into the discussion that happened at the last panel. There's an incredible opportunity in Florida in particular to connect the dots between making our grid more secure and investing in distributed energy resources and battery storage. Solar and battery storage are at the point now where it really makes sense to start making investments in technologies that allow us to island when the grid goes down and have emergency backup power at emergency shelters like this high school that was affected by Hurricane Michael. It's hard to see from the picture, but in the kind of very back corner, you can see a solar panel, and even though the gym got blown out by the hurricane, this building was able to continue to provide electricity as an emergency shelter because they had battery storage and solar energy. And that's an incredible value to that community where folks are trying to figure out how to plug in their cell phones, contact their loved ones, find a place that's warm and or that has air conditioning for a couple of hours. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Armando Fernandez with Florida Power and Light to talk a little bit about what they're doing.
Well, Katie, thank you. My name is Armando Fernandez, and I am an External Affairs Manager at Florida Power and Light. I'm very happy to be part of this panel, and I'm super excited to be here to share with everyone all the great projects that FPL has currently underway regarding solar. FPL right now is in one of the most aggressive solar expansion in this country's history, with 18 clean energy centers already online and more on the way. In fact, one of those centers was built right here in Miami-Dade County and opened last February. That center is providing 74.5 megawatts of electricity to the grid right now, which is equivalent to taking 13,000 cars off the road. Additionally, our solar fleet earlier this year also surpassed 1,000 megawatts of energy production, which is equivalent to taking 264,000 cars off the road, and enough to power 250 homes. We think that's a great story. And if that's what I was here to tell you, I think that would be great in itself. But we're also very excited to announce our 30 by 30 initiative, which is our plans to install 30 million panels by 2030. That will make Florida a global leader, not national, global leader in solar production, and make FPL 67% cleaner than the national utility average. Wow. To Katie's point, solar is only part of the equation, so that's why I'm very happy also to announce that FPL is just recently announced our plans to build the world's largest battery storage project. It is actually 4 times larger than any battery currently in existence. And when that battery, coupled with our Manatee County Clean Energy Center, will be able to supply power to the grid even when the sun isn't shining. The battery will have 409 megawatts of capacity, which is equivalent to 100 million iPhones. I think that's a staggering number. And it will, and I think you guys are going to like this one, it will modernize, it will speed up, accelerate our modernization plans, which will reduce, which represents $100 million of savings to our customer and will reduce carbon's emission by 1 million tons. Wow. And then lastly, there's a little bit more good news. We recently announced our Solar Together initiative, which is our community solar program, which is the largest in the country right now. And that project is for people who cannot or do not wish to put solar panels on the roof. They could buy into FPL's portfolio of clean energy centers and offset part or all of their energy usage. I, for one, I live in Coral Gables, and I have this beautiful oak tree on my property, which would limit the effectiveness of panels on my roof. With this project, with this program, I'll be able to offset my usage without, going through the expense, or I personally cannot put panels on my roof. And there's two other benefits to the program. First, it's completely portable, so you could take your energy credits with you if you decide to move. And secondly, because you're buying into a portfolio of sites and not a single location, your generation is not subject to weather events at that single location. And then I'd like to close by letting everyone know that FPL is not new to solar. We actually built our first solar plant right here in Miami-Dade County in 1984. It was a small 10 kilowatt unit, but it helped us learn about the burgeoning technology. Fast forward to 2009, when at the time we built the largest solar plant that was commissioned by President Obama. So, it's really exciting to see how far we've come in the last 30 plus years, and with all these announcements, how much further we're gonna go. So with that, I turn it back to the panel.
I'll turn it over to Chris now.
Thank you, Kate. Hey, everyone. Good morning. It's quite a privilege to be here today, and really want to, send my thanks to the Clio Institute for this invitation. My talk today is really going to shed light on the role that cities play in accelerating the clean energy economy and the work that we're doing in the city of Orlando to be a shining example for other communities across the state. I would be remiss without recognizing one of my favorite mayors across the state, Phil Stoddard, who is here in the audience. So thank you for your leadership. For those who don't know, Phil actually, Mayor Stoddard has a blog that talks about all of the things he's doing to advance solar, and it's just amazing to see an elected official like him do that. I will say that, though, my favorite mayor is Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, and that is my mayor in the city of Orlando, so let's get that straight first and foremost. So really, my short talk here is really going to talk about the focus that we've been having in Orlando to turn the spigot off of the carbon emissions that are coming into the atmosphere, more on the mitigation side of things. And when we look at clean energy, we're looking at things holistically in Orlando: energy efficiency, demand-side management, renewables, of course, electric vehicle transformations, even with our buses. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm really going to target renewables. Orlando's had a long-standing program called GreenWorks Orlando that was launched by Mayor Dyer in 2007 and really looked at a holistic way for us to move into the 21st century as a global leader in sustainability, trying to make us the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and equitable, and and economically diverse city in the Southeast, one of the most resilient and sustainable cities in the country. And clean energy is certainly one of those cornerstone focus areas out of 7 that I get to work on every single day. It's one of the most areas that I'm most passionate about as well. Before diving into that, I want to say everything that you're going to see here is founded on the notion that we truly realize that climate change is a reality. It's an existential threat. It's one of the most biggest challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. And we truly believe that although 70% of global climate change emissions are coming from cities, that we truly believe that cities are the answer to solving this problem. Mayor Dyer has not only joined the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, now over 9,000 mayors around the world committing to the Paris Climate Agreement. We've passed the Under 2 MOU, the official Paris Agreement for subnational governments. We have joined WASI, the We Are Still In coalition, and of course being a major active player of the Climate Mayors organization, really mobilizing over 400 mayors across the country pushing this agenda forward. We are seeing that cities, not just across the country, but really in the state of Florida, are starting to step up as it relates to their commitments to moving to 100% renewable energy for our future. And Orlando is one of now 7 cities in the state who have passed resolutions through our city councils committing us to this future. This happened for us in August of 2017, and since then have been really trying to step up on what cities can do to accelerate this role. Many may or may not be aware of an initiative called SolSmart, and this was launched by the Solar Foundation and the U.S. Department of Energy. And the whole effort is focused on how cities can minimize what we call the soft costs of going solar. Most people don't realize that nearly half of the total cost to invest in solar is soft costs. It's not your hardware, it's not the panels or the inverters or the balance of systems, it's the permitting and the planning and the customer acquisition and the marketing in order to get that deal sold. And where we're gonna see most of the drop in price moving forward in the renewables space, specifically solar, is in the soft cost components. So we in the city have been really focused on what are the things that we can do to streamline solar permits. We now have an expedited solar permit program between 3 and 5 business days to turn around a solar permit. We have defined solar equipment in the land development code, making it easier for new construction to incorporate solar under new buildings. We have even started to train our permit and inspection staff, as well as the solar contractors, through how to go through this permit process much more quickly, and have become a SolSmart Gold community, which we're really excited about. We also have been working with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and we're selected as one of 9 cities around the country to build a 100% renewables roadmap. I don't think any city in the country at this point in time really knows how we're going to achieve this goal. We have a good idea of the technologies, but some of those are going to be advancing over the next 5 to 10 years to allow us to achieve that with reliable, with clean, with renewable, and affordable electricity. So this effort called Solar Energy Innovation Network has been focused on helping us to build the solar capacity projection modeling, meaning how much solar can we actually produce on our rooftops, on our brownfield sites, even floating solar, which I'll get into. And so we're mapping out, and we've identified more than double the amount of our demand can be produced by solar in the city of Orlando currently, right now, which is a huge deal. Part of this process is looking at resiliency, and for those critical infrastructures, it was talked about in this last panel about the wastewater treatment systems and the importance of those. Part of our SEIN effort with NREL is looking at our critical facilities like community centers, emergency admin buildings, 911 call center, emergency operations center, and the like, fire stations that are critical during these types of storms. We've identified over 3 megawatts that we're in the process of going forward with procurement that will install solar plus storage at these critical sites and ensure that in a future unintended extreme weather event, we will be prepared to continue responding to this event and recovering from it much quicker. Thank you. A couple of other things. Here's a great example of one of the rooftop systems that we have. I would be remiss by saying that the collaboration in Orlando with our utility is the cornerstone of the reason why Orlando has been rising in the ranks in accelerating this movement. We have of course, a vested interest in Orlando Utilities Commission as a city-owned and operated utility, and so we are very focused on ways in which we find that balance of affordability, reliability, and sustainability. We have started to build every new building now to be solar ready and to be net exporting of power. This is our newest LEED Gold facility that has gone up in Orlando, and we are officially net exporting power every single month. It is the first net zero facility within the city's portfolio, and moving forward, as I mentioned, every building that the city will build won't just be LEED, but it'll also be solar and EV ready to ensure that we are preparing ourselves. And then with the utility, we also realized that community solar is an amazing opportunity for those who are moving into apartments and condos, or those who don't have access to a unhampered rooftop. And so we have 20 megawatts now of community solar where people are virtually net metering, able to subscribe to renewables and offset up to 100% of their consumption. We also have taken inspiration of the solar co-ops by Florida Sun. Shameless plug, I've been on the board of Florida Sun across the state since its inception. And the work that the nonprofit sector has been doing to accelerate the growth of solar is just mind-boggling, right? 12 megawatts of rooftop solar in the last 2.5 years from neighbors who have been coming together to accelerate this growth. That is something to be proud of here in the state of Florida. So this is the newest part of that community solar fleet. It's a 13 megawatt community solar farm on top of an old coal ash landfill, a byproduct landfill that was capped. It's a brownfield site, and we're looking at many other of these types of sites. Orlando has been a subscriber to this solar farm, and now over 10% of our city operations are powered by solar. That means our city hall, 17 fire stations, and the Orlando Police Headquarters fully powered by solar as of January 1st of 2018. And we're doing a lot more. 120 megawatts is currently being developed as we speak. That'll move the portfolio of renewables in Orlando's mix from 2% currently to 10% by the end of 2020 for the citywide, right? So we are making measurable progress in moving this forward. And the last cool component is we all are aware of these retention pond systems, and Orlando has been on the forefront of testing photovoltaics, the concept of floating solar on these not spring-fed lakes, but man-made water bodies that could provide gigawatts of power across just Central Florida, let alone the state of Florida. NREL has a new study that says that 10% of the entire country could be powered off of floating solar moving forward into the future. 10% of our entire demand, right? Big deal. So in closing, energy financing is also critical, and we've enabled PACE, a diverse market of PACE, and we've been able to now see millions of dollars per year being invested by trying to minimize that upfront cost burden for renewables. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Kate, and we'll move forward there.
Thanks, Chris. Lots of things happening in Orlando. It's exciting to see. Okay, next we'll turn it over to Jennifer with Environment Florida.
Thanks, Katie. Chris is always a tough act to follow. So, very exciting stuff happening in Orlando, though. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jennifer. I'm the State Director for Environment Florida. We're a statewide citizen-based environmental advocacy group. We broadly work to protect Florida's air, water, and open spaces, and a lot of that has to do with energy. So I'm going to take a few minutes and share a little bit about why we think solar is so important for Florida, and then I'm going to shift gears and help connect the dots between what's happening locally at the city level and why the state needs to also take action and what our vision is for doing that. There we go. All right. Now, as we've heard for the last day or so, we all know that burning oil, coal, gas has polluted our air and water and land for decades, and now it is changing the climate even faster than scientists feared it would. We can have a healthier, more resilient Florida for future generations, the one most of us get to enjoy now, but it is going to require that we change the way that we produce and consume energy. But how do we power all of this without this? Well, we need to do a lot of different things, but there's one step that we have to take. We have to transition Florida to clean, renewable energy, and that means largely the sun in Florida and in some cases wind. The obstacles really aren't physical. They're challenges of imagination and of commitment. And so when I say that the obstacles aren't physical, here are some facts. So on this chart, you can see the annual electricity consumption of the United States on the left, over there. And then on the right, you can see the different technologies that we can use to harvest renewable energy and the amount of electricity that we have the technical ability to get from them. So here's the wild thing. The United States has the ability to produce 100 times as much electricity from the sun as we use each year, 100 times, and 10 times as much electricity from the wind. Every single state in the country, every single one, can produce more electricity from renewables than it uses each year. That's the technical ability. So the challenges of getting rid of fossil fuels here in Florida and across the country, we can do it. They're not physical. And the challenge is building the collective will to actually propel our society onto a new course towards a better future. If we're going to change the world, we have to come together and decide to do that together. Now, the good news is that here in Florida and across the country, citizens, businesses, nonprofit organizations, different institutions, local governments want more solar. People want more solar. And many, as we just heard, for example, from Chris, are actively working to acquire and demand more solar. And so today, as Chris mentioned, not only Orlando, but 6 other cities here in Florida have joined over 100 across the country in committing to power not just their municipal operations, but in many cases, the entire city with 100% renewable energy no later than 2050. And yesterday, actually, the Environment Florida, the Clio Institute, Florida Conservation Voters, and Sierra Club released an updated version of this map, which you can get online and probably can't see too clearly from where y'all are, but it basically maps all the different local actions that are happening across the state to both move towards renewables and solar and act on climate. And as you can see, the map is filling up. It's filling up, but there's also some gaps. I think as a side note, it's also worth noting there are 131 major companies, including many that do business here in Florida, like Bank of America, Walmart, Anheuser-Busch, that have also pledged to power their entire operations with renewable energy. And there's also 40 college campuses, none yet in Florida, FIU, I'm looking at you, that are entirely powered by renewable energy right now. Again, none in Florida. We're working on it. But even with all of this local action and at the business level, nonprofit level, we're going to need our governor and our state legislators to meaningfully tackle, to actually tackle Florida's challenges, to also shift and require and pass policies that are going to increase renewables and solar in our state. Because as Katie mentioned, we still only get just over 1% of our energy here in Florida from solar. So there's a lot of really good stuff happening. It's good momentum forward, but it's still just a little over 1%. It's pretty embarrassing. So that being said, I will end on a positive note. This legislative session, there's one more week left. There were a number of bills that are really promising and really exciting, although they were not heard. But they're good places to start. One is State Representative Anna Escamani and State Senator Orlando, and State Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez introduced a bill that would transition Florida to 100% renewable energy by 2050. And the way it does that is it sets the goal and then directs the Office of Energy, which is housed in Commissioner Freed's Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, to work with other agencies, both public and private, to figure out the plan for how to get there. So this is really exciting, and Florida, it means, joins 9 other states who are also considering legislation to do just that, to move their entire state to 100%. And if you don't know, there are 3 entire states now, Hawaii, California, and just earlier this spring, New Mexico, that have made this commitment. They've actually passed the commitment. So it's possible. And then the second bill I want to highlight is a community solar bill that Katie is actually an expert on. It's another really exciting bill that would make it easier for people who don't have access to solar necessarily, because who can't necessarily put solar on their own home or don't have access to it, make it easier for them to actually go solar. And again, that's just the tip of the iceberg, but the bottom line is that in order for our cities and all our local institutions to actually make this transition fully, we're going to need leadership at the state level as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Awesome.
So I want to kick things off in terms of the conversational portion of this panel with a pretty general question, but I would love to know from y'all's perspective, sorry y'all, Atlanta's coming out.
Atlanta.
Can't say that in Miami. Talk about what is driving solar power growth from your organization's perspective. And Armando, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you, Katie. FPL is all about advancing clean, affordable, reliable power. And I would say for FPL, it's what you mentioned before, the falling prices of solar voltaic, I think it's 90% over the last 11 years. That coupled with our economies of scale and our expertise in building universal scale solar really makes sense for our customers. In fact, the last 4 solar centers, and these are 400-acre, 74.5 megawatt solar centers, will generate a net savings to our customers of $40 million over the life of the asset.
It's incredible.
And then the second key driver for us is the emergence of battery technology. I think battery, when coupled with solar, makes it more predictable, more reliable. So those are the two key drivers for us.
Yeah, in the city of Orlando, I mean, we look at this pretty logically, and that is that every city wants to create clean, safe environments for the people who live, work, learn, and play, right? And when it comes down to it, our priority is around improving the lives of people, protecting the planet, and ensuring that we have a long-term trajectory of long-term prosperity and economic growth. And so it's truly the triple bottom line perspective. And when you look at solar, as of recently, a solar panel installer is one of the fastest growing jobs in the country and was the fastest growing job in Florida as of last year. And that's a big deal. With being less than, right over 1% of our overall power, and for it to be one of the fastest growing industries, is an indicator that this is an opportunity for cities to position itself to attract talent, to attract business development, and to ensure that we have long-term trajectory of economic growth for our communities, right? Of course, the priority on doing our part to turn that spigot off of contributing to this looming issue of climate change. And it's not just the grander issue of climate change, but the fact that in local governments and within our communities, it's about local pollution, air pollution. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to public health. This conversation needs to continue to pivot to be focused on how this impacts our lives, our families, my kids, my grandkids. And the more that we do that, the more of a priority we'll see utilities and businesses and governments and academia and our neighbors getting together to drive this movement forward. And that's exactly what's happening in Orlando.
Thanks. So in the States, generally solar and other forms of renewable energy, but mostly solar, have skyrocketed over the course of, say, 2008 to now in a really meaningful way. And when we look at which states are leading the way when it comes to that, it's states that have quite simply policies that don't make it harder to go solar, but actually make it easier to go solar. So I try not to use California necessarily as an example, but I do think it's a good one. So California, for example, in the mid-2000s launched the Million Solar Roofs initiative, which kind of propelled that industry in that state. And that's how California, in part, in addition to their renewable portfolio standard, became a national leader in solar. California is certainly not the only one. States across the country that we don't necessarily think of as having a ton of sunshine are also leading the way when it comes to solar and renewables. And again, if we dig deeper and look at why, a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, or potentially all the time, it comes down to the policies that are in place. And so that's what we need to do more of here in Florida.
And one of those in the Southeast is North Carolina, right? Mm-hmm. I think North Carolina has the second highest installed capacity in the country, and it was based on policy, right? It was the PURPA initiative and trying to move community solar and utility scale solar forward.
Absolutely. I think what's so telling about what's happening now with solar is that gone are the days where we have to make choices between affordability and sustainability. This resource is saving customers millions and millions of dollars. So it's really amazing to see kind of the confluence of all of those motivations really take place and see the market move forward. I'd love to hear from each of you. We've talked some about where Florida is at right now in terms of solar installations as kind of a piece of the overall energy pie. But from your perspective, where should we be at? And Jennifer, maybe I'll start with you and move back this way.
Well, 100, but, I'll elaborate. We can and we should be leading the way. We should be powering our entire state with 100% renewable energy. Most of that will come from solar. We actually can do it. I think it will take all of us, right? It'll take local government, institutions, utility companies. It'll literally take all of us to transform our society so that, for example, if I go to a mall, there is solar at every single mall in the state of Florida. That is literally wasted space. There's lots of easy, simple things that are low-hanging fruit that we can do right now that would meaningfully chip away and get us, maybe less than 1% closer to 100. And I think another piece, honestly, another piece is just setting the goal, right? Like, we have to set goals, and we're calling for 100 because the stakes are so high, right? But 50, 75 to 100, to get there, we can have incremental benchmarks that we can collectively, as a business, nonprofit, other institutions, rally around and direct our efforts to, so that, again, we can have a Florida that's not, that's resilient for the future.
I often say that we're in a renewable energy arms race right now at this point in time in the state of Florida. And I think we saw that following the 2016 elections when Floridians spoke up about what they think about solar. We ended up reducing the tax on tangible personal property tax, which completely opened the game for solar leasing. And then we voted down a kind of controversial policy that was trying to lock in the current regulation into the Constitution. And so voters showed that, one, they know what they're talking about, we're sophisticated, and the help of the media, local media was massive, and social media was massive, and organizations like Clio and many others, and Environment of Florida, of course, Sierra, many others who are out there educating the community about these differences, right? But also, we're at a time where the utilities, and what Armando's saying is a prime example, where utilities are realizing that the cheapest way for us to produce electricity in a reliable way is through renewable energy, right? Which is incredible, right? We just that community solar farm that you saw on the coal ash landfill, that 13 megawatts came in at $70 a megawatt hour, 7 cents a kWh. A year later, or a year and a half later, we went after a huge initiative called the Florida Municipal Solar Project, and it was a cooperative of municipal and public power agencies who came together, 14 of us, and said, we all want to go solar in different ways. OUC and the city of Orlando became the anchor tenant of 108 megawatts I mentioned that we're in the process of building. And it was part of a larger 223 megawatt system that's currently being built that'll be split out to the various other public agencies. That array came in at $35 a megawatt hour, 3.5 cents a kWh, lower than coal, lower than natural gas, right now, with no state incentive, in 2019, with one of the lowest costs of power in the country, right? Huge deal. These guys aren't doing it to be green. They're doing it to make green and to save us money. And we need to applaud that and continue this renewable energy arms race. I love when these, Duke and FPL and all these are tick-tacking about how much more solar we're committed to. And the 30 million panels is an unbelievable goal, and we appreciate your effort in that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think, Katie, you mentioned it. I think we're ranked number 9th right now in solar capacity, and number 8. And well, 9th in solar resource. I'm sorry,
yes.
solar resource, and number 8th in solar capacity. And a little bit of fact that we didn't hit is that in 2017 alone, the state of Florida leapfrogged 5 other states. Mm-hmm. We see that growth accelerating, and obviously with our, commitment to do 30 million panels by 2030, I think the Sunshine State will be where everybody expects us to be, a world leader in solar development. And, if I may close with a little fact some of you might not know, our parent company, NextEra Energy, is the world leader in generation from wind and solar. So, you could say that solar development is ingrained into our DNA.
It's very cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about folks who aren't able to install rooftop solar. And I think there's probably some folks here in the audience who are, similar to you, Armando, where, they've got a shaded roof, or maybe they are renters, they live in multifamily housing, and they're just not able to make that investment. And we've talked a little bit about this concept of community solar, but I'd like to just flesh that out a little bit for folks. What are the opportunities for people who aren't able to make that investment at their own residence? And what are utilities and advocacy organizations doing to make those opportunities more available? And maybe I'll start with you this time, Armando.
Okay. Well, thank you, Katie. Sure. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, FPL recently announced our Solar Together program, which is the largest Solar Together program in the country right now. In fact, it's larger than all other community solar projects combined. And it is precisely for the customers that you mentioned that cannot or do not wish to put panels on their roof, but still want to get the benefits of solar energy. It's a voluntary program, and they could subscribe to offset all or part of their energy usage with by subscribing to one of 20 new solar centers that we're going to build. I think we're going to build in the magnitude of 1,400 megawatts to support community solar. And there's benefits that come along with this. It's completely portable, so if you move, you take your credits with you. There's no long-term commitments. You could cancel anytime. We see this as a great win for our community, and if the initial reception is any indication, our customers are eager to sign up.
Can you just talk a little bit about the value proposition for customers of doing that? At what point are they going to end up getting a return on that investment, and also when the program would be available for folks to sign up?
Well, knock on wood, if the PSC approves it later this year, it should be open to customers later this year, and then I think the first plan comes online in early 2020. And then the payback, they'll get, at the beginning, the first year, they might see a slight increase in their bills, but they'll start seeing a return on their investment in year 3 to 5, and then simple payback by year 7. And then after that, it's the 100% of that credit for the life of that asset. So,
which is about 30 years, right?
Yes, 30 years.
Great. Thanks.
I think you did a good job.
Perfect.
Unless you want me to elaborate.
No, it's, yeah, that
Which
sounds great. Thank you. Chris, maybe I'll ask you a specific question. You've talked about this incredible goal that the city of Orlando has. Can you talk about what are some of the challenges that you're facing as you're working to meet that goal? And do you think those are similar to other cities that have put out those similarly aggressive goals to get 100% clean energy?
Sure. There certainly are a lot of challenges in meeting our 100% goal. First and foremost, I think the way that the state of Florida is regulated as it relates to electricity makes it more difficult than maybe other places around the country to truly embrace solar. As an example, third-party sale of electricity is outlawed. And that happens to be one of the most popular mechanisms, not just in the country, but around the world, for people to invest in solar, right? If FPL came to us today and said, hey, I'm going to lock in your rate of electricity over a 20 to 25 year period with no inflation and levelize that cost, but the catch is you have to pay all 25 years up front today, would you do it? And most people don't have the means to do it, the credit score to do it, or the interest because there's a risk there. And so in Florida, in order for us to install solar, we have to buy solar equipment, an asset that we put on our roof and that we own on our roof, and amortize that investment over time. And so what cities have been trying to do, like Orlando, is minimize that upfront cost burden, right, that we're burdened with, and try to figure out creative ways to amortize that investment to find these cash flow scenarios. PACE financing is a prime example where 100% of the money to install in solar is now given to you without any out-of-pocket expense, and you amortize that investment on property tax repayment over 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and you could find that cash flow scenario. So I think one of the challenges is specifically for public institutions not having a tax appetite, right, is that when we invest in solar on a rooftop, let's say taxpayers buy solar panels, because it's the only way to do it, and we invest in the city of Orlando's rooftops, we leave 30 to 40% on the table, essentially, of the investment tax credit and the depreciation benefits of that system. And so the return on investment is longer, and that should be the opposite, right? For those who are public institutions or churches, houses of worship, or academic institutions or nonprofits, these are institutions that are for the public good, and we should try to encourage them to do the right thing for the public as well. And so that's a challenge, right? Just the overall mechanism. Secondly is time is not on our side. And that's a huge challenge as well, right? The IPCC 1.5 degree report is telling us by 2030, if we don't act now and accelerate orders of magnitude more than we're doing today, we are going to see much bigger, different challenges than we're facing now, right? And so time is not on our side. And thirdly, for local government I can speak to, is just the lack of capacity, right? This is a capacity issue within city government. Cities traditionally do not have a focus on how to move to 100% renewable electricity. They're trying to pick up the trash. We're trying to process the wastewater. We're trying to police our streets. We're not ingrained to think, okay, we need a climate advisor to help us focus on these issues. And so we're fortunate to be a recipient of the recent American Cities Climate Challenge, one of the 25 cities around the country selected to accelerate our efforts in reducing carbon emissions through efficiency, building efficiency, through electrification of our vehicles, and of course through the expansion of renewable energy. And that will add a full-time climate advisor to my office starting next month for a 2-year period to start to really accelerate this work. So the roles that philanthropy plays in supporting cities to add this type of capacity to work on these policy and programmatic issues is one of the biggest challenges we face. And we want to encourage more philanthropic communities to support cities in doing this work.
Sounds great. So Jennifer, I'm going to close with a question for you, and then if we've got time, I'd love to take a couple of questions from the audience as well. What can individuals do to support clean energy in Florida?
So much. Well, I mean, certainly if you can put solar on your home and you have the luxury to afford your home and own your home, certainly do that. I think the biggest thing that individuals can do to create institutional change, though, is engage locally and at the state level. Our cities, as Orlando, St. Petersburg, and the other cities across the state have been doing, have largely made these commitments because people within the community advocated for it, right, for years. And so engaging and pushing local governments to continue in some cases doing the right thing is really important. There's a lot of bureaucracy and status quo, so that takes momentum to change. And then also at the state level, demanding that our state elected officials, our state legislators, implement policies that are going to move us towards 100% renewable energy, because really the alternative is not doing that. And as Chris mentioned, we just don't have the time. The clock is ticking.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, oh, sorry. Hi.
No, it's okay. I'm going to take 2 questions from the audience. Oh, okay. Yeah. I know. This is loud. Take it down. So we are running out of time, as you guys noticed, but I am going to take 2 questions. I'm going to take 2 and 2, and then the panelists are going to be here, so you're welcome to take your questions outside. We're going to be breaking for lunch right after this, so you'll have opportunity, but I'm going to start with you, and then with you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, Kathy, and Chris. My name is Jorge Cortez. I'm founder of Momentum International Accelerator for Social Innovation back in 2013 at the Lab Miami. And my question precisely is, well, first, thank you for what you guys are doing. We need to keep uniting the force of millennials towards this. I do not celebrate this progress on the solar energy because it should have happened 5 or 10 years ago. But I think in terms of energy and resilience, I want to ask Mr. Fernandez about the ruling of the Supreme Court of Florida yesterday about the contamination of your nuclear facility in Miami-Dade County, that it's contaminating the water, and you guys are asking for users and customers to pay for that and at a price of $175 million when you guys make billions in profit. In fact, your parent company makes more than $3 billion in profit. Why would you ask your customers to pay for that when you guys are contaminating the water?
So, Armando, this is not related to solar. You're welcome to answer.
Well,
but yeah.
And I apologize because it's a little bit out of my area of expertise, and I haven't had an opportunity to see what you're talking about. If you like, I'd be more than happy to, sidebar with you and take your information, and I'll be happy to get to the bottom of that and get you some more information on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great panel. Really exciting news about all the solar coming online. I have a question particularly for Mr. Fernandez, but I think others can chime in. And that has to do, I didn't hear anyone talk about energy efficiency. So, you know, I think about a decade ago, we were actually moving forward on the cheapest form of energy, which is not wasting it in the first place. So I'd love to know more about how aggressive FPL and, you know, others are being on the energy efficiency front. And then a kind of second part of my question is, can you give us a sense of what's the percentage of the full FPL portfolio in terms of both the energy efficiency piece and then also the renewables piece?
Well,
Good question.
and I'll take the second part of your question first. You know, as a regulated utility, I mean, we have a responsibility to, you know, produce solar cost effectively, which means lower bills for our customers. I will tell you, what we're envisioning is that by 2030, to be producing 40% of our electricity with 0 emissions.
Great.
I'd love to mention the point on energy efficiency. Thank you for bringing that up. And I, in my opening, mentioned that we define this clean energy strategy much more broadly than just renewables. I will say that efficiency is one of the cornerstones of our climate action program, and it's because that buildings within the city of Orlando contribute to 70+% of the carbon emissions associated with our carbon footprint. And it's because we're still using primarily dirty energy for most of that electricity, right? And so when you look at the intensity of carbon coming out of, you know, producing that, it's a big deal. So for us, first and foremost, we've set very ambitious standards on our city-owned facilities, I mentioned, for efficiency. Everything needs to be LEED certified, and really we're building LEED Silver, LEED Gold. Additionally, we have passed a policy that Miami and Miami-Dade County are exploring, and hopefully will pass, that requires all of the largest buildings above 50,000 square feet to provide an energy and water benchmark annually, report that score to the city to be made publicly transparent, and require ASHRAE Level 2 energy audits for facilities under the national average of energy use intensity for that type of building. This is a critical foundational policy that has been known as a best practice around the country to require this cycle of improvement and market transformation towards retrofitting our buildings to be more energy efficient. It is the cleanest and most cost-effective way, truthfully, to reduce carbon emissions, is to make the built environment more efficient because of the amount of waste and the amount of intensity that that's having to our carbon footprint. So thank you for bringing that up. It should be a big part of the portfolio.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So